welcome to Miss Rose's Story Time. Today we are reading Carry On Mr. Bowditch by Jean Lee Latham. It's raining outside, so we're going to be reading inside in my den. And we are on page 173, chapter 18, with Carry On Mr. Bowditch. So wherever this story finds you, I hope it finds you well. And let's begin. The Astra to the rescue. When Nate went aboard the Astra, two sailors handled his gear for him, staggering under the weight of the extra sea chest. Mr. Collins said, "What have we here, Mr. Bowditch? A private store of cannonballs?" "Books and charts," Nate told him. "I am starting now to check every figure in every table that's published, just to see how many errors are in them." Collins stared. "Man, that'll take you a year." "I'll be lucky if it doesn't take 3 years. But why in the name of sense should you slave over?" Nate bellowed. "Because they ought to be right. That's why." He started for the companionway. Someone in the ducks and a striped grinned and tailored salute. For a moment, Nate didn't recognize him. "Johnny?" Johnny swaggered. "Johnny Groman, able seaman, sir." "Congratulations," Nate told him. He hoped Prince wouldn't feel too bad about the loss of a cabin boy. He was going to feel bad enough about the loss of Lem. He went below, stowed his gear, and returned to the deck. Tom Owens was busy at one of the guns. Maybe Tom would console Prince about the loss of Lem. Tom was a mighty handy man, too, with the guns. Once more, the crew froze to attention. Once more, Captain Pierce came aboard and whipped them that stern glance around, seeing everything, looking at no one. It's just his got to see face, I guess," Nate decided. "He probably won't smile between here and Cadiz." Nate was right. He didn't. A month later, Spain loomed on the horizon. A blockade of British ships stood between the Astra and the harbor of Cadiz. Captain Price answered the hail of a British ship, ordered his logboat overside, and he and Nate went to present their papers to the British captain. The Englishmen scanned their papers, asked dozens of questions, and gave them a pass to enter Cadiz and trade. "Watch out for French spies," he told them. "They're everywhere. We've even found a Frenchman in one of our crews with a plot to blow up our powder room. Luckily, his pronunciation gave him away. The way he'd say, well, for instance, commencement. And Nate gave the word its French pronunciation. The British captain raised his eyebrows. "Exactly. You mean you speak French?" He looked at Prince. "Congratulations, sir, on having an educated man on board. Not the usual thing on a merchant ship, you know." Prince's eyes glinted. He was probably thinking that what the Englishman almost said was not the usual thing on an American ship. He drawled, "Yes, an educated man is handy. For instance, when there are errors in Moore, he can find them." "Errors in Moore?" The Englishman stared. "Not really Moore's fault," Prince said soothingly. "The mistakes were in one of the Mackinley's tablets, and he returned it to the Astra looking very pleased with himself." Mr. Collins called the men aft, down to the last one, even the cabin boy. The men gathered. Little Charlie Waldo, the new cabin boy, listened big-eyed while Prince explained the danger of French ships. Mr. Bowditch will tell you how you can spot them by their accent. Keep your ears cocked. If a man with that accent wants to come aboard for any reason, call Mr. Bowditch. As Nate explained, he watched Charlie's face. I'll bet he thought Charlie finds himself a spy before we leave Cadiz. The next day, when they anchored off Cadiz, the health officers came aboard. Nate saw Charlie edging around, his head cocked listening. Then something jerked Nat's attention from Charlie. The Spanish officer picked up their logbook in one gloved hand, wheeled and tossed it overboard. Nate roared at him in Spanish. The health officer smiled and explained, they always dump logbooks overboard. Didn't the senior know that salt water would purify the book, banish disease? They fished up the book, dripping wet, scanned it, and bowed to Nate. Everything was in order and safe. The Astra could trade with Cadiz. That night, Nate smiled when he wrote to Elizabeth about the saltwater cure for their logbook. He was glad when he had things like that to tell her. The next night, after he had visited Cadiz, he had things he could tell her too, about the city of stone, built on a rocky promontory jutting down into the blue sea. They must whitewash every building every year. Everything is so white that the glare hurts your eyes. The streets are so narrow and the buildings so tall that you feel hemmed in when you walk here. No wonder they have such tall buildings, though. They have nowhere to go but up. He stopped writing and stared at the paper. When would Elizabeth get this letter, he wondered. No chance to send it back to her unless they hailed a ship coming from the Mediterranean, going back to America. Maybe he'd just have to carry it home and they'd read it together. When he got home, Nate sighed. Already the time seemed long. He laid his letter aside and went on deck for a walk before he turned in. Charlie Waldo was on deck talking to himself. Good for you, Charlie, Nate said. You have that French accent all right. You won't miss them if they come prowling around, will you? Charlie smiled and bent his head to wipe his wrist over one cheek. In the moonlight, Nate could see the youngster's tear-stained face. Poor Tad. He was homesick. Charlie, I wonder if you could do something for me. Aye, aye, sir. I'm working on a problem in navigation. I'd like to explain it to you. If I can make you understand, I'll know I've got it. Yes, sir. Anything to help. They walked the deck while Nate explained. Charlie was quick. He got the explanation much faster than grown men generally did. Thank you, Charlie. That's helped. Thank you, Mr. Bowditch. Sure, you know, but you'd help me, too. Charlie grinned and went below, still muttering his words with the misplaced accent. One morning during their second week in Cadiz, when Nate was in Prince's cabin, Charlie came to them, goggle-eyed, with, "We've got him, sir, a French spy. I can tell by the way he talks." Captain Price's mouth twitched. "Come on, Mr. Bowditch." They went on deck. Charlie was right. The erect, solitary-looking man did have a French accent. He was Count Melvent, he told them, one of the French Navy. He had fled to Spain during the French Revolution. Nate knew that Charlie's sigh of disappointment came from his heels. Count Melvent said, "I understand that this is a scholar aboard this American ship who is interested in astronomy, a very great scholar who has discovered a new way to work lunars." Prince nodded towards Nate. "There's your very great scholar, Nathaniel Bowditch." Melvent invited Nate to visit the new observatory at Cadiz. When the Count had gone, Prince bowed solemnly. "How do you do, scholar?" Nate laughed, but he felt the same warm flood of happiness he had felt when Dr. Holyoke called him an astronomer. He couldn't explain how he felt to a grown man, though. What it was to remember when he was 12 and found he'd never go to school again. Nathaniel Bowditch, indentured. He shrugged off the memory. That night, when he stood in the observatory, he wished that he could tell Elizabeth what it was like to be there, looking through the telescope and seem to bring the moon and stars close enough to touch. It was late when he returned to the ash tree, but he wrote to her, "You seemed very near when I looked at the moon, because I knew you could see it too." He smiled at that sentence, pleased. Maybe he'd learn to say things the way he wanted to someday. "All hands on deck!" He heard the yell and jumped to his feet. Dimly he realized he'd been hearing the boom of a cannon in the distance. He hurried topside. The gunfire was coming from the British fleet. What had happened? Was Napoleon attacking? He was supposed to be somewhere in the Mediterranean. The deck of the ash tree was alive with action, men running to secure battle lanterns, to loosen the guns. Presently, a boat approached them, and a British officer came aboard. He was smiling and almost too excited to talk. "Nelson has trounced Napoleon's fleet in the mouth of the Nile. We've got him now, bottled up in Africa." So it was just a celebration. Tom Owens growled, "Secure your guns." Nate smiled at the words. Tom sounded as disgusted as Lem Harvey would have been. The Englishman said again, "Bottled up in Africa. No more trouble with Napoleon, I hope." What about the French privateers in the Mediterranean? Prince asked. "We're standing out of Cadiz for El Town soon. Into the Mediterranean? You'll be safer in convoy with our fleet." So Astrea had some 400 other vessels started in a vast convoy, guarded by British warships. It was not long before the lookout on the Astrea saw 3 small vessels dropping astern. Collins leveled his glass. The lagging vessels were American. "What are the fools up to?" he muttered. Prince studied them too. "They're too heavy laden to keep up. Scuppers under the lot of them. Serve them right if..." Then he had, "Bring her about, Mr. Collins." "Aye, aye, sir." There was no hesitation from the first mate or from any of the crew as they fell to with a will to bring the Astrea about. They felt the protection of the convoy and headed back towards the floundering little vessels. When the Astrea was close enough to speak the ships, Captain Price hailed them. The Astrea, he told them, had 19 guns and a crew that could use them. Cheers rose from the little ships. Tom Owens swaggered and grinned. "One-man convoy, that's what we are." Nate smiled to himself. Lem Harvey wasn't the only man born for a fight. For 2 days, the Astrea trimmed sails to the speed of the floundering vessels. Tom began muttering under his breath. What was the use? He wanted to know, wallowing along with fools who didn't know how to sail. "They couldn't make 6 knots in a trade wind," he grumbled. "They don't deserve..." The lookouts sing along. "Sail ho!" frozen every man in his tracks. Then with a glad bellow, Tom leaped for the guns. Captain Prince came on deck and leveled his glass. "3 of them," he said, "and flying French colors." There was no doubt about the colors or the intentions of the 3 ships. They were altering their course, bearing straight down on the Astrea. When the decks were cleared, the guns bowsed out. Prince went below with Nate. Prince opened the logbook and picked up a quill. "Better note this down," he said dryly. Maybe I be a little rushed later." He made the entry and dusted the ink with his hand. "We'll need someone to the powder room when things start," he said. Nate sat down and pulled off his shoes. He knew the danger of a scuffed nail striking a spark and setting off the powder. I can take care of the powder room." Prince frowned and started to speak. Then he shrugged. "Why not? I was going to say we can't risk having our navigator blown to bits. You know, if the powder room gets a direct hit, it goes. But if the powder room's blown to bits, the Ashley won't need a navigator, will she? Carry on, Mr. Bowditch." He went topside. That was kind of grim. Anyway, Nate went to the powder room, blinking in the gloom. The only light they came from a small round window into the next cabin. For a moment, Nate was disappointed. He thought of getting a little work done while he waited. He'd forgotten they couldn't risk candles or lanterns near the kegs and bags of powder. Johnny was there, sloshing down the floor with water. "They say it helps some, of course, if that there of kegs got a direct hit." He shrugged and grinned. "Good luck, Mr. Bowditch, sir." Nate's eyes grew accustomed to the dim glow. It really wasn't too dark, he decided, and no use just sitting there twiddling his thumbs till they needed him to hand up powder. He went to his cabin and got his slate and pencil. The next thing he heard was Prince's bellow. He started and jumped to his feet. "Aye, aye, sir. You ready for powder?" Prince said. "The Frenchies didn't like our guns. They got close enough for a good look, then coward sailed and cleared out. Tom's disgusted. Sorry I forgot about you and left you down there so long." "Long? Great guns, man. You've been there 3 hours. "You're sure, sir?" Prince broke out in a roar of laughter that brought Collins below. Prince told him the joke. "I give up. I've been through a lot of my day, but I never before saw a man huddle on a powder keg and forgot where he was for 3 hours. That's one for your letter to Elizabeth." Nate shook his head. "She might worry, sir." Take my advice and tell her, Collins said. "You're married a long time, you know, and women always hear everything sooner or later. If you skip anything, some kind friend is sure to say, 'Did your husband ever tell you about the time?' So you tell her first, the way you want her to hear it." "Your husband," Nate smiled at the sound of that. He closed the powder room and Dog shut the door and went for his shoes. In his cabin, he returned to his work. Nothing for him to do now until at Alicante. They had been off Alicante about a week when a ship flying the American flag anchored near them. The Ember for Salem, Captain Gorman's commanding. Nate hadn't realized how glad he'd be to see someone from home until Captain Gorman came on board the Ashley. Captain Gorman did not seem half so glad to see Nate. He nodded abruptly and said, "Captain Prince, I'd like to see you below." Nate felt his temper rising, but he shrugged off his anger. Captain Gorman probably had something on his mind. He'd be in a better mood after he had talked to Captain Prince. Charlie came to him, frowning with importance. "The captain's compliments, Mr. Bowditch. He'll see you below." When Nate entered the cabin, Prince said, "Sit down, Nate. Sit down, boy." Captain Gorman said with his head bowed, his elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. Prince strode up and down the cabin a few turns. I'm not going to stand off and about this, Nat. Elizabeth, oh my goodness. I'm not going to stand in on about this, Nat. Elizabeth, your wife is dead." Oh. Captain Gorman said, "That's all I know, Mr. Bowditch. A ship passed me that had left Salem later than we had. They gave me the word." Nate didn't know when they went out. He realized finally that he was alone and the cabin was growing dark. 8 bells sounded. He had offered to take the anchor watch. He went topside. Mr. Collins said, "You've been relieved, Mr. Bowditch." Nate thanked him and went forward to the bow. For a long time he stood there staring at the sky. The moon rose and made a glittery path on the water. Nate found himself staring down into the water. How deep was it, he wondered. Charlie Waldorf spoke at his elbow. "Mr. Bowditch, sir?" Nate stiffened. "Yes. What is it?" "I need you, sir. Could you help me, please? This navigation I'm trying to learn." "Of course, Charlie. Come along on my cabin." For an hour he worked with Charlie over the problems that had stumped him, explaining this way and that until the boy understood. "I have it now, sir. Thank you." "Thank you, Charlie Waldo. You may not know, but you've helped me too." He went topside again and found Mr. Collins. "I'll stand the next anchor watch," he said. "I don't seem particularly sleepy." Collins nodded. "Right, Mr. Bowditch." He was silent for a moment. Then he went on quietly. "I remember when I lost my wife. Work helped." That's sad. Wow, sorry to end chapter 18 so sadly. We'll look forward tomorrow to read chapter 19. I hope you all are doing well. Please like, share, and subscribe to Miss Rose's Storytime. Please read 30 minutes every day to increase your reading. 20 to stay the same. Less than 20 it depletes. So read for 30 minutes. Like, share, and subscribe to other people. Some people are quarantined right now. Some people are in nursing homes without their family being able to visit. Things of that nature. They might enjoy spending some time listening to a story. We used to always typically read stories after lunch. And I remember reading to my boys, and then my boys were being able to read, and it's just really nice, a way for your food to digest and for you to increase your vocabulary and take yourself to lots of different places. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. God bless you. Till tomorrow.